Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. I paint furniture every single week. This week's video is a little bit different to usual because Dixie Belle Paint have sent me, along with Jodie from Decoupage Vintage Designs and Shayna from The Flip Piece, who are also Dixie Belle brand ambassadors, a mystery box. And we have to paint something with the contents of that box. So I'm going to show you what they sent and then we'll get stuck in. So the first thing they sent me was this distressed damask decoupage rice paper. I also have a selection of brushes. We've got the mini, we've got the Belle Brush, and we also have the Big Daddy. And then I've got some neutrals. I don't know what to do with neutrals. I don't usually paint in neutrals, but here we go. We've got French linen in the chalk mineral paint range and drop cloth. We also have Buttercream, Stormy Seas, and vintage duck egg. And then they've given me satin clear coat to seal. So I'm going to put my thinking cap on. I have a piece of furniture in mind. Genuinely don't know what I'm going to do with it yet and how I'm going to use all of these products on it. But let's go. So, as you gathered from the intro, I literally have no idea what I'm going to do with these products. However, this is the piece that I've chosen to use them on, and it's just going to be something that evolves as I go. But first things first, as always, it needs a good clean. I've got a pre-mixed solution of Dixie Belle's White Lightning in my spray bottle along with water. I'm just spritzing that all over the piece, giving it a good old clean, making sure there's no cobwebs or any grease or grime on the piece. And then once it was clean, I made sure I rinsed it with clean, warm water. And then the trim around the drawers had some damage and there was quite a large piece missing. It was too big to repair, so I took all the trim off. And I'm just basically sliding my scraper underneath and flicking it off because it's usually glued, and then there were some little tacks as well just holding it in place. So I just made sure that they all came out with some pliers and made sure the surface was nice and smooth. I also took the original handles off. Usually this is something that I do before I clean, just because you can get grime and dirt build up behind the handles. But as I say, this piece is kind of evolving as it's going, so it's not something that I did before I cleaned as I usually would. And then I gave it a scuff sand with my electric sander with a 120 grit paper on it. And this is just going to make sure that my paint has got something to grip onto. This is quite a high, shiny finish, which is typical of pieces of this style. So you're not looking to take that original finish right off. You don't need to do that. You just need to give it a scuff sand. So literally scuff up the original finish. That's absolutely perfectly adequate. And then you are ready to paint. Okay, we had a minor technical hitch, folks, with some footage of this makeover, and somehow I didn't record myself painting the inside of the bookcase in French linen, but that's all I did. So I'm going to give this kind of a two-tone look, so the interior is going to be slightly different to the exterior. I've got 5 colours to use, so I was kind of racking my brains on how I can make them work on such a small piece. So all I did when the camera was off, but I thought it was on, is paint the inner bit of that bookcase in French linen from Dixie Belle in the chalk mineral paint range. And now what I'm doing is painting the exterior in vintage duck egg. I'm using the synthetic brush that they gave me in my mystery box for a smooth finish. Okay, so the drawers are dry and I've come back to them and I've thought this might be the case. So where I've removed the trim that was damaged from around the edge, it's actually visible. You can tell that it's been there. So I don't know if this class is cheating or not, but I'm going to use Dixie Mud to repair that little bit of sort of around the edge of the drawers where you can see it, because otherwise if I keep going, it's not gonna, you're just going to basically be able to see it. So whether I'm bending the rules slightly or breaking them all together by using Dixie Mud, I'm using Dixie Mud. So Dixie Mud it is, and I'm just applying it with a combination of my finger and basically a lolly stick or a tongue depressor if you're posh, and I'm just making sure that it's going to fill all of that imperfections around the edge where I removed the trim. And once it was dry, I gave it a quick sand with my electric sander for a smooth finish. And this is when my idea started to take shape, really, at this point. Up until now, I had literally no idea what I was doing. And I'd already painted the drawers in vintage duck egg to match the rest of the bookcase sort of exterior. And I changed my mind. I wanted to make the drawers a little bit more of a feature. So I changed the colour to French linen to match the inside of the bookcase. And I also, at this point, remembered that there was a shelf in the bookcase, which I'd cleaned and sanded and put to one side and totally forgot about. So I gave that a coat of French linen as well. So back to the outside of this piece. Up until now, I'd obviously only used 2 colours, French linen and vintage duck egg. And I had 5 in total to try and use. So I added vintage duck egg and Stormy Seas onto a plate. I then grabbed my Big Daddy brush and a water mister and then stippled the 2 colours together on the surface of the bookcase where I had already placed vintage duck egg for a kind of tonal look. A little bit of stipple, a little bit of water. Great camera angle there. We're just off shot, which is absolutely great. But it will move obviously in a second, so you can actually see what I'm doing. And these 2 colours work really well together. If you wanted a very sort of subtle tonal look, these 2 colours do work really well together. So I'm just very lightly tapping the surface of the bookcase with the 2 colours on my brush. And this is just going to give me a very sort of soft, almost cloudy, stippled effect. It's not going to be one flat colour. It's just going to add a little bit more tonal variation to the bookcase and give it a little bit more interest. So I just kept my hands super light. I didn't press on too hard. I don't want these colours to mix together. I still want them to kind of have that stippled tonal look. But I do want them to... I don't want it to be too patchy. So I'm using a little bit of water to get them to sort of mix together, and I'm just working in small areas. So I did the top, now doing the side. Basically everywhere that was already painted in vintage duck egg is going to get this treatment, and I'm just working it in until I'm happy with how it looks. So in keeping with the textured look on the outside, I did a similar effect on the inside. And I'm using Buttercream and Drop Cloth here, which are my 2 other neutrals, and painting them over the top of the dried French linen. And then before the paint had chance to dry, I'm getting some shop cloth and just dabbing on the surface, which is a technique that's sometimes referred to as ragging. And it gives you this really cool kind of almost stony effect. And I did the same to the base, the sides and the drawers. And then remember me saying at the start of the video, this piece kind of evolved as it went on. And also remember me saying that neutrals scare me. They're not something that I use a lot. And I just couldn't do the Buttercream drop cloth combo. It was far too pale. So I went over the top of that when it was dry with French linen in the same ragging technique. So instead of my base colour being French linen and the paler colour over the top, it was just reversed. This colour is just a little bit stronger, it's a little bit richer, and I just felt a little bit more comfortable using it. So I just thought I'd show you the technique on the drawers, just in a sort of slowed down version. So obviously the first coat that I did was French linen, and then I did the ragging technique with drop cloth and buttercream over the top. That is what I'm now painting over again in French linen. Are you keeping up so far? And then I'm spritzing the surface with water. You don't need a lot of water for this technique. It just helps loosen the paint slightly. And then I'm just dabbing my shop cloth, which I've rolled up to create a sort of texture effect with my shop cloth, and I'm just dabbing it over the surface. It gives you a really subtle textured look. It's kind of similar to the effect that I did on the exterior of the piece. I'm just using a slightly different way of doing it. So the shop cloth that I'm using is actually quite a soft shop cloth. If you wanted slightly more texture, what you can do is use a paper that is slightly more sort of rigid. So like newspaper or a scrunched up piece of brown paper can give you more texture. And the more you dab at the paint, obviously the more of that top colour you will pull off. So you can play around with it and get some really cool effects. Okay, so here is my idea that I thought up a couple of steps back. I'm going to give the drawers stripes. Stripes isn't something that I do a huge amount of, but we're gonna do it on this piece. So I'm using painter's tape. Obviously the drawers are completely dry, and I'm using painter's tape to also get the spacing between each stripe equal. So I'm actually using frog tape, which is suitable for painted surfaces, and again using that tiny bit of tape in the center to get the spacing correct. It's actually a lot easier for me to do this on the floor, mainly because I'm half blind, and trying to not get my head in the way of the camera was getting on my nerves. And obviously if a stripe goes off, you know if a stripe's not level, you can see it straight away. So I needed to get these straight, so I decided to work on the floor because I could just get my head in there without getting in the way of the camera. Okay, spacing's all good. I just pressed the tape down firmly, and then I went over the drawer with Satin clear coat, which was obviously in my mystery box. I am using a foam and dandy brush, which is again ever so slightly cheating, but I had it to hand. And I'm just applying a really thin coat over the entire drawer. Once that really thin coat of clear coated was on, I blasted mine with a hairdryer. You can leave it to dry on its own, but obviously I'm impatient, so we sped it up. And all that clear coat does is create an invisible barrier between the tape and your painted piece to stop bleed through happening when you are painting your stripes. So I then went in with my colour that I'd painted on the outside. This is a combination of Stormy Seas and Vintage Duck Egg. I'm using the Belle Brush because it's a smaller surface area. I don't need to use the Big Daddy, and I'm just stippling it on in exactly the same technique that I did on the outside of the bookcase. And then you cross your fingers and hope for the best. I'm going to zoom in here so you can see the crispness of the lines, because I even impressed myself with this. So when the paint is still wet, so my Vintage Duck Egg / Stormy Seas combo is still wet, you then want to peel the tape off. And you should have really nice crisp lines. And just because I don't like things being too perfect, I got my sander out and just distressed the stripes a little bit, and also just went around the drawer edges, as you've probably seen me do before, just to give the piece a little bit more kind of character. And then to finish, I used Satin clear coat. I'm a wax gal, but we work with what we've been given in a mystery box. Although I did use a foam and dandy brush to put it on with. Take me to prison, tell Dixie Belle I break the rules, disqualify me, but I'm using a foam and dandy brush to put my top coat on, because they are, without a shadow of a doubt, the best way for me personally to apply a top coat. I love the finish that they give. They give a really nice, even, consistent coat of top coat with no streaking, and I really like the finish that they give. So I'm using it. So, as always, a little zoomed up shot. You can see the stripes. Pretty pleased with how they turned out. Hopefully you can see the stippled effect I created in the blues. And here's the final shot. So there we go, folks. The end of the mystery box challenge. I would personally like to thank Jodie for putting my name forward for this challenge. I'm just kidding. I've actually quite enjoyed it. It's been nice using products that I wouldn't ordinarily use and trying to make them fit. And I know what you're thinking. If you are wondering where the decoupage paper went, hello. I popped it in a frame. I didn't want to put it on the piece, so I put it in a frame. Is that cheating, or is that just slightly bending the rules? I think I thought outside the box and I did quite well. So if you liked it, let me know. Let me know what you think of the bookcase as well. I am actually really pleased with how it turned out. And this piece will be for sale on my website if you are interested. And make sure you hit the subscribe button for more furniture painting videos.